Also want to thank the panelists for being here today. Certainly appreciate that. And my question is directed to Mr. Keating. In your testimony, you stated that the Disclose Act would harm the rights of Americans guaranteed by the First Amendment to freely speak, publish, organize into groups, and petition. How significant are the risks to our First Amendment rights of free speech and association under the disclosure requirements in this legislation?
Well, I think they're very significant. We would see a real atrophy of national organizations being able to influence policy. I think there's actually a great deal of confusion about what is actually in this proposal. Just calling something a campaign-related disbursement doesn't make it a campaign-related disbursement. We're talking about expenditures on communications to the public that could be even a year or more away from election. That doesn't do anything to urge anyone to vote for or against any particular candidate. And yet this bill would sweep that in. It's really a form of not only campaign finance, but it would be the first ever legislation to require disclosure for grassroots lobbying efforts. And this was tried in the 1970s, and it generated a huge amount of opposition across the political spectrum. And I think if there was understanding about that today, and in fact, I think if there was a danger of this actually becoming law, I think a lot of groups would emerge and say, look, we're all in favor of disclosure for actual campaigning for or against candidates, but we're not in favor of here is advocating on important public issues. And whether you're on the left or on the right, there are going to be causes that are minority viewpoints where people are simply not going to be willing to write a check or make a donation to support an unpopular cause. It could be because where they live, it's unpopular, or it could be unpopular throughout the country. So I think, I really fear if this bill becomes law over time, over decades, it will make it far more difficult for minority viewpoints to appeal to our fellow Americans to say, look, rethink things. We need to make these changes nationally. So I would encourage the supporters of this to take a look at the bill and to try to draw a better line between what's actually campaign related and what is actually pushing for improving our government.
Thank you. And also, Mr. Keatings, what are the risks associated with publicly disclosing the names and all of this personal information on donors to super PACs, considering the growing risk associated with the cancel culture in this country, in which individuals, businesses, or organizations are targeted with protests or threats of positions that they would take?
Well, look, I think it's already a problem right now. And I think there are many people who, I mean, look, there are millions of people that give to candidates, but I think there are millions more that don't. And the reason why they don't is because they are smart enough to know if they give over $200 or if they give through Act Blue or Win Red, even like $1, their name will be on the internet forever and associated with that candidate. If that candidate becomes an elected official, everything good or bad that candidate has ever done. So I think we're already seeing some suppression. I think a lot of small donors are simply not willing to step forward to support candidates and parties. But I really fear that if we expand this to advocacy on issues, as this proposal would do, we're going to see it very difficult to push for legislation to improve our government over time, over many years and many decades.